Thank you, Brandon. So the the skills mobility partnerships is a concept that we have launched in the framework of the Global Compact on Migration in December 2018, when the Global Compact was discussed and adopted in Marrakesh. We also launched the Global Skills Mobility Partnership together with our sister agencies UNESCO and ILO. And actually also together with the private sector, with the International Trade Union, and with the International Organization of Employers. So obviously, this concept, this model for skills mobility partnerships is very much based in the objectives of the Global Compact on Migration, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. Why? Because the skills mobility partnership enhances pathways for regular migration. With these partnerships that we promote between countries of origin and countries of destination, we basically want to bring the two sides together to invest in skills development and facilitate also the mutual recognition of skills, because if the two sides are already working together and are investing jointly in the skills development in sectors where both countries of origin and countries of destination are actually in need of skilled workforce, then that, for obvious reason, facilitates also the mutual recognition of skills. And we have beautiful examples of governments doing that already at a fairly large scale between India and Saudi Arabia, or India and the United Arab Emirates, for example. With the skills mobility partnerships, we also want to ensure not only that we promote regular migration and regular legal pathways for migration, but we also establish mechanisms that ensure the protection of migrant workers' rights, especially when it comes to portability of social security entitlements. And finally, we promote partnerships, as the title of this whole concept already says, between countries of origin and countries of destination. So hence we are also strengthening or we are promoting the objective 23 of the Global Compact on Migration, which is all about international cooperation and global partnerships. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, you can see that it obviously speaks to SDG 10, because safe and orderly and regular migration makes a huge contribution to this goal, which is to reduce inequalities. And it helps with SDG 8, which is about decent work, because we are promoting with this model that migrants will migrate more successfully, because they will migrate with the right skill sets, with the skill sets that are actually in demand in countries of origin as well as in countries of destination. And they will be able to take up decent jobs because they have the right qualifications with which they can enter the labor market and work according to their qualifications, according to their skill levels. And we promote with this migration also integration and social cohesion, as well as migration for development, because to the extent that migrants... Sorry?
Il y a eu un petit problème technique.
So I wait for a moment, yes?
Sorry, Tanja, bear with us 1 second.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Is there an issue with the translation? Or I'm not sure what the technical problem is. Okay, no, Tanja, it seems fine. You can continue. Thank you.
All right, okay. So SDG 8, decent work, to the extent that migrant workers are able to migrate successfully, they can of course also be expected to make a bigger contribution to the development in the countries of origin through their transfer of skills which they acquire in the country of destination, through the financial capital that they might acquire during migration, also through the social capital that they acquire, the contacts that they make, the networks that they build, the partners that they meet, and which they might even bring to the countries of origin to establish maybe transnational enterprises. And finally, since this is all about skills development, it's also clear that this model of skills mobility partnerships contributes to the SDG 4, which is about quality education. We move to the next slide. IOM has, I can say, global experience with such skills-related projects. In MENA region alone, we have about 10 projects that we would qualify as such skills-related projects. We have more than 70 worldwide. And our expertise, and I will talk to some of that, not to all of that, a little bit later, is very much related to pre-departure orientation, because that is also an essential part of a safe, regular and orderly migration process. We have plenty of experience in actually assisting governments to work together. First of all, with all the line ministries that need to be involved in such a skills mobility partnerships. This is not only about the Ministry of Labor. It actually needs the ministries of labor to work together with the ministries of education, with the ministries of interior, with the ministries of foreign affairs, with the ministries of trade sometimes, depending on how the competences are divided in each country. But also, and that is maybe even more crucial, to work together with the private sector. Because ultimately, it's the businesses, it's who are the employers. Those are the stakeholders that are actually demanding the skills. So we also have plenty of experience in establishing these labor market information systems that can bring these stakeholders together to determine what are the skills needs now, but also in 5 years or 8 years from now, and how can the governments together cooperate in ensuring that these skills needs will be met. We have, as the Organization for Migration, plenty of experience in supporting our migrants throughout this whole migration cycle, from the pre-employment and pre-departure phase, throughout migration, all the way until they return and when they should be reintegrated in the country of origin. And we have, through this accompaniment of migrants in this whole migration process, plenty of experience in facilitating the certification and recognition of skills. And last but not least, those are also areas where we work very closely together with our sister agencies, such as ILO or as the European Training Foundation. Yeah? In the context of North Africa EU, the European Training Foundation is also a very important partner when it comes to certification and skills recognition. Now, these skills mobility partnerships, the characteristic features of those partnerships are always that those are either bilateral or multilateral arrangements between states. I guess that you can all picture, what a bilateral agreement would look like. But we are currently, in the African context, we are also working with the African Union to discuss such skills-based mobility between the Eastern Horn of Africa and the Gulf states, for example. Yeah? So that would be a multilateral arrangements where we facilitate the inclusion of skills mobility in multilateral labor migration agreements between two regions or between two regional processes. We are actually also promoting the skills mobility partnerships, this model, with the EU. So we have participated as IOM, just as ILO as well, in the legal consultation process, or let me rephrase that, the public consultation process on legal migration, when the EU basically asked all kinds of stakeholders for their opinion and on legal migration. And we are also using our strategic annual meetings between the senior management of IOM and the EU, the Commission, to discuss skills mobility partnerships. So much about how we try to promote this concept, either within bilateral or multilateral arrangements. Another characteristic feature that I already explained is that in order to make these partnerships work, it needs really all the stakeholders' involvement, not only the government and the private sector, but also the trade unions, also the migrant associations, the diaspora associations, because they all are part of this process and can make it successful. And another characteristic feature is this cooperation between the countries of origin or the country of origin and the country of destination in making sure that the workforce that is needed on both sides has the right skill sets and can then basically and focuses actually also on all workers. Yeah? So that is really the clue of this skills mobility partnership, that the training of the workforce takes place in the country of origin. It's a joint investment. The costs for this investment are shared between the countries of origin and the countries of destination. The training takes part in the country of origin, which results in a trained workforce, a better trained workforce in the countries of origin, which is skilled up to a level, an international level that is recognized also in, let's say, the countries of Europe, yeah? Because in Europe you have a qualification framework that applies throughout. So if the workers are qualified for the Italian or the French or the Belgian labor market, then they are also able to move around within Europe because those qualifications fulfill the standards of the EU, not only of one particular country. So the training takes place in the country of origin, and it leaves, in that sense, the country of origin with a better trained workforce, which is equipped with the skills that are needed in the labor market, not only in the country of destination, but also in the country of origin, which allows workers to actually make a choice whether they want to work in the country of origin or in the country of destination. If you invest in the educational, vocational training system in a country of origin as a whole, in a particular sector that has been identified, be it hospitality, be it the care industry, and I think my colleague Darko from Bosnia, he will share later on an example of what happened to the health sector in Bosnia, where basically some of the European member states have recruited a lot of the young people that have gone through the medical schools in Bosnia, but do not necessarily invest in this effort to train this medical staff. That is not what a skills mobility partnership is about, right? The better example would be to invest in the training of the people in the country of origin to make sure that the country of origin is also has a trained workforce at its disposition and does not suffer from a depletion of human resources in particular sectors. So that those are really the main points of the skills mobility partnerships. It's an agreement between states. It involves all stakeholders, especially also the private sector, to identify the sectors where the skills are needed. It's about a joint cost-sharing investment in the skills training in the countries of origin, which includes all workers. Part of them who will move, others who will remain and join the local labor market. Okay. I think I will not go into too much detail of everything that you see here on this screen. I think it is already pretty clear what are the advantages of such a skills mobility partnership for the states, because it allows for better matching of skills demand and supply. It contributes to economic growth and local development on both sides, countries of origin and countries of destination, and it supports regular migration vis-à-vis irregular migration. And we keep on hearing that the EU would like to promote legal migration, would like to see more regular migration in order to stop irregular migration. And we believe that these skills mobility partnerships is one way to achieve this goal. For migrants, on the other hand, it allows them to develop their skills, it allows them to develop their career plans, and of course it ensures that they can be well prepared for the migration experience, because it is planned and it takes place in a safe manner. All right, let's move to the next slide. We have some projects, some examples of such skills projects. The Promise project is a project that is happening in the Asian Pacific region. The Link It project is a project that took place in the EU. We have also the so-called Comprehensive Information and Orientation Program that takes place in the Gulf. And the last project that you see here on this slide is a project that we implemented in Kyrgyzstan, where we basically, in cooperation with Russia, which is the main country of destination for the Central Asian countries and also for Kyrgyzstan, we invested in the upgrading and reform of the vocational education and training in 5 curricula in Kyrgyzstan, in cooperation with the stakeholders from Russia, to ensure that the certificates that the graduates would obtain would be recognized in Russia, and the migrant workers from Central Asia, from Kyrgyzstan, coming to Russia, having these certificates in their hands, would be able to access better jobs in Russia. In the same vein, let me just add 2 more examples, just to illustrate how such a skills mobility partnership can look like in real. One example is from the MENA region here as well. It was a project between Italy and Egypt, and the 2 countries have identified the hospitality sector as the sector where both countries need skilled workforce. I think you are all aware, Egypt is really famous for many, many touristic sites. The need for skilled workforce is obvious in the tourism sector. Likewise, Italy. So in this case, this was a partnership that was formed between the 2 governments, and the 2 ministries of education worked together in upgrading and reforming the curricula on hospitality, and the training took place in Egypt. They chose one of the tourism schools in Fayoum Governorate, which is one of the governorates which is really very much dependent on tourism. And the Italian government also invested some additional money in upgrading the facility as such. So they invested, in the classrooms and the restaurant and the kitchen, so that the students would actually be able to work with how do you call this? Like with the latest equipment. In the kitchen, at the reception area, in the restaurant area, to know how to handle the equipment and the machinery according to these latest standards. Those students who went to that school then also had the possibility to do an internship in Italy, which gave them the opportunity to improve their language skills and also expose them to working in a different environment, different from the Egyptian environment, which definitely improved not only their very technical skills, but also their social skills, their so-called soft skills, which we know are very important and will be even more important with the whole future of work. So, this is an example, and just to tell you that the graduates from that school, they continue to be very much in demand, and not only in Italy, but even more so in Egypt. So about 2/3 of each of the generation that leaves that school finds employment in Egypt, because with that skill set and with that training, they are very much in demand also here in Egypt. And all of a sudden, you find that also Egyptian employers are not only willing, but also able to pay them better salaries to make sure that they can retain them in Egypt. But about 1/3 has also the chance to go to Italy, because the skills and the skill certificates that they get are according to the Italian standards. So that is one example. And the other example is one example from my previous region where I was working. And here it was the private sector in Austria that reached out to Serbia. And they did so because you have lots of Austrian companies that did business in Serbia, not only in Serbia, but a lot of them in Serbia. And they didn't have the skilled workforce that they needed to work in those companies, Austrian companies in Serbia. So in this case, it was the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, the private sector, that reached out to the Serbian government. And they decided, together with the Ministry of Education in Serbia, to reform the vocational training in Serbia for the population at large. Remember, focusing on all workers, to improve the skill level overall of the young people in Serbia in those sectors which were relevant for the Austrian companies, where the Austrian companies were working. So those are just a few illustrations of how such a skills mobility partnership could look like. Let me end my presentation by going back one more time to this global skills partnership on migration, which is this concept that was launched, as you can see, together with ILO and UNESCO at the Global Compact of Migration in Marrakesh in 2018. And this global skills partnership has now turned into a global project where we undertake, on the one hand, a global mapping of such skills-based migration, skills-based mobility initiatives, where we want to showcase what are exemplary state policies, where we would like to identify what are the roles of the private stakeholders, what are their skill strategies. We want to look at the role of international organizations in operationalizing such skills mobility partnerships. We want to then formulate policy recommendations and methodology in the framework of this global project. We will develop capacity development tools, which we can then use and make available to the governments interested in learning more about such skills mobility partnerships. We intend to establish a global platform of knowledge sharing and good practice. And finally, we also want to pilot some of those capacity development tools. Yes, and that was my presentation about skills mobility partnerships. So I thank you very much for your attention. And once again, thank you, Brandon, for giving me the opportunity to present this to our distinguished audience today. And I'm waiting for comments or questions to this partnership. And I'm always available to answer questions also bilaterally if you choose to send me an email. Thank you very much.